as 5 a.m. or quarter 5 now have to make those children wake up early so they can go with the traffic. Oh, why don't you shift the time for resumption so that children can sleep a lot more and be healthier, you know?
Well, back to school to you, and congratulations if you've paid school fees. If you haven't paid yet, well done. You go still pay them, You go pay them. School is always in session here on Hard Facts. Aghogho and I are here daily to give you what we promised, the best insights into today's most important topics. We bring them to you, we break them down, and we give you the facts, and you can form an informed opinion. We have a great show planned as always. If you missed any of last week's shows, you can watch it on Facebook. Remember that you can now see your radio. And we'll start you off with the big three, where 20 governors in Nigeria, as they mark their first or second 100 days, have no cabinets. We bring you the latest updates from the xenophobia crisis, and yesterday was World Literacy Day. What's on Checkpoint, Aghogho?
Yeah, with Checkpoint, we're looking at security in Lagos in the last 100 days. What has happened since new sheriff came into town? Even though they call themselves chief security officers, they have no power whatsoever when it comes to deployment or security, but all of that. But it's good to see under your watch what happened if you had more crime happen in the state. So that's going to be on Checkpoint. We're going to be taking the people's thoughts about security in Lagos State.
And then on the big hard fact.
Yeah, on the big hard fact, we will be looking South Africa. The cost of business, huge. Investment
cost
losses.
On businesses.
Yeah, cost on businesses, you know. Huge losses also too. And also, it's going to eventually run on those businesses because of the premium now you will have to do businesses in South Africa or in Nigeria when you know that you stand the risk of having your investment attacked because of political problems in either of those countries. So that's going to be on Checkpoint. We're going to be measuring those laws.
On the big hard fact.
On the big hard fact. Correspondent Ijoma Esek will be at one of the malls that were affected when people attacked in reaction to the attacks by Nigerians in South Africa, of Nigeria in South Africa. So she's going to be there first time to say whether business have resumed or like it's happened in ShopRite at Jakonde, or people are still trying to recover from their losses.
And then we're going to wrap up the show with I Beg to Differ and Lagosa. If you've never listened to any episode of Lagosa, today is a good day to start. It starts at 6:45. As usual, throughout the show, we're bringing you the latest updates from the worlds of news, sports, and entertainment. But let's get started with the big three.
This is the Big Three.
The Big Three.
On Hard Facts. On 99.3 Nigeria Info.
You know what to expect on the big three, stories that everyone is talking about right now. Should we change the law so that governors cannot go 100 days without commissioners? Was President Buhari's message to President Ramaphosa strong enough? And in today's world, is the ability to read and write enough? Let's get into these stories. Our first story is that only 16 out of 36 states have full cabinets. Only 16 out of 36 states have full cabinets. 19 of the governors who were sworn in on May 29th have still not fully constituted their cabinets. The affected states are Abia, Adamawa, Bauchi, Cross River, Enugu, Gombe, Jigawa, Kano, Katsina, Kebbi, Kwara, Nasarawa, Niger, Ogun, Rivers, Taraba, and Yobe. Those governors all just marked the first 100 days of their term. And a 20th state, Osun, also has no commissioners. And to discuss this issue, we have a guest on the phone who's from SBM Intelligence. SBM Intelligence is a research, intelligence, and data firm. Chetan Wanze, welcome to Hard Facts.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
It's difficult to hear you. Something wrong with your phone?
I said good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes. Great. Welcome. Now,
You want me to be shouting at you?
yes, we'll like that. Now, have we ever had a situation where 100 days into the new term, 19 governors have not appointed a cabinet?
No, it's the first time. One of those nice Guinness Book of Records things.
Say that again. It's the first time?
I said it's the first time. One of those nice Guinness Book of Records things.
Guinness Book of Record things. Now, there's a lot of publicity surrounding the time it took President Buhari to appoint a cabinet. Why were the governors able to fly under the radar?
I think it's simple, really. we have this top-heavy federal system where everybody looks at Abuja and tends to forget about the subnational units. It's a holdover from the military era that is not going to go away anytime soon. And the truth is that to a large extent, the governors took their cue from Abuja. If Abuja had behaved itself and formed the cabinet pretty quickly, then the governors would have also done the same. That's my view.
Now, you do a lot of surveys and polls in the state as head of research for SBM. What do the citizens feel about their governors not picking commissioners?
Again, that's the ironic thing. Many citizens in many of these states really don't care. As long as they are having their little salaries or whatever it is paid, then they're fine. But when you ask them about things that are happening in Abuja, then you hear the complaints coming out. It's this detachment, for want of a better word, as a people would completely abandon or almost completely abandon the state level. So, if you go to say Kwara or Enugu, so in Enugu, the main complaint right now with the governor, which he's started running around trying to sort out, is things concerning attacks by herdsmen. Kwara, they're happy, or people seem happy because salaries are being paid. I don't hear much complaints in Oboh. So these are states that have been through in recent times. Rivers, their main concern is security. So once you start talking about things like, oh, a cabinet hasn't been sworn in and all of that, not many people are listening to you.
But can a governor be seriously expected to be handling the affairs of the state without a cabinet?
Number one, Section 192 of the Constitution makes it compulsory for governors to appoint commissioners, subject to the approval by the state houses of assembly. The governors are technically involved, although to be fair, we must point out that the Constitution does not give a timeline, but technically the governors are in violation. Running. So Oshun, as an example, has been running since November last year, instead having special supervisors. Now, some people will try to make the argument that Oshun had the whole court case thing. But for me, it doesn't really fly, because a serious government would have a cabinet in place even before swearing in, whether it's the first swearing in or the second swearing in or whatever.
Okay. Now, before we let you go, the Constitution doesn't set a deadline for when governors or presidents should name their cabinets. Is that an amendment that is worth making, and is anybody pushing for it?
Nobody's pushing for it as far as I know, because this is a relatively new problem. So in normal countries, the way it works is a constitution exists, a problem like this surfaces, and then people push for an amendment or a modification to take care of that problem. That should be the steps that we should take. However, my own argument, I even want to take it further, is that our constitution is not, and this is me being charitable, our constitution is not the best of documents. I think it needs a complete rewrite.
Let's end it at that, Cheta. Thank you so much for talking to us on Hard Facts. Cheta Wanze is the head of research at SBM Intelligence. SBM Intelligence is a research, intelligence, and data firm. Let's come to you, though, who's listening. How do you feel about 20 governors not having cabinets? Do you think this will hinder governance, or will it make no difference? Or are you one of those people who Cheta talks about when they were gathering this data, who doesn't care and only cares about what's happening at the center? Aghogho, do you think we're ever going to get to the point where we take our eyes away from the center and focus on what's happening in our states?
No, I doubt it. Never. Well, maybe in the other states, I'm more conversant with what's happening in Lagos, because Lagos still got the hangover of being the former capital of the country, as well as being still the economic capital, and most of the media is domiciled here. So you probably will have this one for a long while. But with many of the states, I've seen that if the governor is around, the commission, nothing happens when the governor is out of town. If the governor is in town, then every stuff happens. But once he steps out of state to some event or whatsoever is happening, even with the commissioners on the ground, you still don't have anything happening because the governor isn't in town. So to step out of that is going to be a difficult thing. Maybe when we begin to practice the so-called fiscal federalism, things probably will change. But a situation where everyone goes to Abuja at the end of the month to pick their share, federal, state, and local government, you probably always be looking towards Abuja, until the entire sharing formula is rejigged. I've heard a number of critics talk about, but Abuja every month happens, and until that stops, maybe then we'll probably start to have more focused discussions around what's going on with the states. Otherwise, if you talk to people, they'll say, when governor no day, nothing happens.
Well, let's take your thoughts after the break. Our numbers are 01277 0993, 01277 1993, and 01277 3993, as well as 01277 2993. Don't forget that 01277 0993 is the number for our female listeners. For our second story, we're returning to the aftermath of the xenophobic attacks in South Africa.
Stay right here on the Big Three on 99.3 Nigeria Info. This is the Big Three.
The Big Three. On Hard Facts.
On 99.3 Nigeria Info.
You know what to expect on the Big Three, stories that everyone's talking about right now. Should we change the law so that governors can't go 100 days without commissioners? Was President Buhari's message to President Ramaphosa strong enough? Because for our second story, we return to the aftermath of the xenophobic attacks in South Africa. I say aftermath, but in reality, the attacks are still ongoing. There were protest marches by South Africans yesterday and more violence in which at least one foreigner was killed. We still have no confirmation of the victim's nationality. Special Envoy Ahmed Rufai Abubakar has delivered President Buhari's message to his South African counterpart and brought back Ramaphosa's reply. Ambassador Abubakar, who is also head of the National Intelligence Agency, conveyed President Buhari's, quote, deep concern, unquote, over the repeated violence against Nigerians and their business interests in South Africa. He urged Ramaphosa to take steps to ensure the safety of African immigrants in South Africa to preserve the nation's image. President Buhari also guaranteed the safety of South African investments in Nigeria and promised to work with South Africa to find a solution to the alleged involvement of a few Nigerians in crime. Ramaphosa said he was deeply embarrassed by the violence and vowed to take steps to secure Nigerian lives and property. Aghogho, you keep watching this thing unfold and it's almost like it's not going to end this time.
Yeah, exactly. So we're planning for stuff for this weekend. I was saying that this will continue for a while because it does appear that maybe to quote Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the leader of the Nkata Freedom Party and the one who was supposed to address the youth, the South African leader, yesterday in Johannesburg. And then you had people stage a walkout, which is unprecedented for someone of Buthelezi's stature, because they wanted to hear something else. And you had people with knockberries and sticks and all of that marching around yesterday while this was going on, threatening foreigners and investors. And the response to the envoy's visit to South Africa we have now is that we have the president ordering the voluntary evacuation of Nigerians in South Africa. 400, we understand, have so far registered their interest, but Nigeria's top diplomat in South Africa thinks we'll still have more because of some people don't have their regular papers. So that's the short-term approach to the problem. But for those who are majority in number who still intend to stay in South Africa because from a number of interviews I've listened to the last couple of days, there are big concerns about what are we coming to do in Nigeria, the question they've asked many of them. Many of them are asking us for compensation. So a couple of them asking, maybe not for their entire compensation, for those who have businesses run into several millions of naira destroyed in the violence in Africa, but at least something for them to kickstart their businesses with. So those are considerations and thoughts and I have when I think about what to do going forward for people who have been protesting, especially in South Africa, who don't want to seem to listen to their leaders.
And there seems to have been mixed reactions to the envoy's message. While some Nigerians are praising the president for telling Ramaphosa that the violence was unacceptable, others are faulting him for mentioning that crime was being committed by a few Nigerians. You also have Nigerians reacting to former South African President Thabo Mbeki speaking on the xenophobic attacks, the comments he made about the xenophobic attacks. He made these comments, and I wonder what your thoughts on it will be.
Even the federal government has been very quiet regarding those attacks on Nigerians. If to a count, maybe we would have seen the reaction of the federal government, but when it comes to human beings, government have been silent. The Nigerians.
We apologize. That's the wrong insert. That's not Thabo Mbeki, unfortunately. We're going to find the right one and play that for you. Now, he made comments that shocked a lot of people here in Nigeria. He said that the mobs in South Africa are not attacking and lynching honest immigrants. They're lynching criminals. And a lot of people did not find those comments from Mbeki acceptable. Their first objection is that even if the victims were indeed criminals, lynching is still wrong. Criminals are meant to be arrested arrested, charged, tried, and if found guilty, imprisoned, not lynched on the streets. So that's the first objection to what Mbeki said. And then the second objection I've heard is from people who say that Mbeki's words are not true. They point to the businesses that have been destroyed, the legitimate businesses. Those were not drug dealers or thieves whose shops were vandalized or who were beating up. And I guess Mbeki's words came as a shock to many because he's usually seen as a moderate, a bit of a technocrat, same as President Ramaphosa. So when you hear these men saying things that seem to justify the violence, it makes people pause, Aghogho.
Yeah, it does make people pause and think about what is going on with South Africa. But I also think of great concern with what the former South African president says. Well, I don't know how many people are big fans of Thabo Mbeki, especially with his problem and describing what the different, his gaffe with HIV/AIDS and HIV and AIDS not leading to HIV and HIV not leading to AIDS. A lot of that responsible for the huge numbers for the AIDS epidemic during his tenure in South Africa. But nevertheless, many of the things I've heard a lot of South African big wigs and politicians talk about this entire thing goes back to South African government in not defining that these attacks are xenophobic attacks in the real sense of it. But a lot of comments I see have come directly pointing at the different people who have been involved in trying to find a way out of this entire thing. I did listen to Oboh Ezekwesili, who decided to go ahead with the World Economic Forum, telling the South African government. I mean, the numbers of Nigerians who are involved in healthcare. Yeah, but she made her point of exactly what she thought, was the entire thing, attacking the government, saying that it's just been cosmetic in the way it's been protecting Nigerians. But she was going to be on the ground to talk about what to do with it, saying that the number of Nigerians who are involved in educational scene in South Africa in double digits percentage-wise, same with education. Number of Nigerians who are lecturers in universities in South Africa, huge numbers also too. So definitely we're not close in any way to resolving this. But maybe just to drum with what Buthelezi says, this is not the first time this is happening, but this most likely is the prayer of most in South Africa will be the last time that this will happen and will not be addressed by the authorities in South Africa.
And our final story on the Big Three today. Yesterday we marked International Literacy Day. Today is set aside by the United Nations for governments, citizens and other stakeholders to contemplate the obstacles in the way of attaining 100% literacy worldwide. And while we have made a lot of progress towards getting the whole world to read and write, we're not there yet. According to the UN, 90% of men and 82.7% of women are literate. The theme of this year's International Literacy Day was literacy and multilingualism. The United Nations believes that increased linguistic diversity in education will play a role in finally wiping out illiteracy. We take reading and writing for granted, Aghogho, but 10% of the world still cannot do it. In
fact, when the day was being announced yesterday, listening to all of the the ceremony and everything, I remembered Second Chance. We watched. I'm not sure you watched Second Chance, Sandra, in the 80s. Okay. It was a gathering of adult literacy class for the different tribes. So you had people like Madame Kofo, you had Abakucha, you had Odiri, the taxi driver. They're all trying to learn
how to read and
write at old age. It was supposed to be something which was supposed to mirror Mind Your Language from the United Kingdom then.
We're too busy watching Indian films in my house.
Okay, so the literacy war has gone. And then seriously speaking, I think also if we look at the breakdown of the literacy levels, you've had ministers come out and say this is of great concern, but haven't done much in getting those numbers. And it's, almost every conversation we have on Nigeria Info always goes back to the literacy levels and the layered up problems that happens when you think about what has happened. If you look at the last time we had discussions on multidimensional poverty, lack of education is taken as a critical aspect in determining people who are poor. So those 11 million children out of school automatically fall back into the poverty gap. And when we look at the SDGs, SDG 4, SDG 17, these are all to remove poverty and as well provide literacy to people all across the world. we are still very far from the mark.
Yes, indeed. I'm happy we're having this conversation because I remember when I first joined Hard Facts, this was one of the first topics that we discussed, literacy in Nigeria. And at the time, we made a point, simple reading and writing are almost not enough anymore as literacy skills in this information age, and that's where we are now. There are an increasing number of skills that are becoming so essential that they're almost a new form of literacy or a new layer. So for example, computing skills, right? I remember we told you one time on Hard Facts that countries like Singapore are teaching all primary school children how to code. That's how to build software. They've gone beyond the stage of ordinary computer literacy. They're making software development a basic universal skill, so that when you compare that with some states in Nigeria, where the literacy rate among children is still hovering close to halfway mark, you have to wonder how those kids will compete with the Singaporean kids in this global economy that is becoming more and more interconnected. And that's why I find the theme for this year's International Literacy Day very interesting. Literacy and multilingualism. And the UN is pushing the idea that if we can find ways to deliver education in the third world in indigenous languages, it will eradicate illiteracy. And it reminded me especially of Oboh Nayono's comments during his ministerial confirmation. He said the Ministry of Science and Technology wants to start teaching science in indigenous languages, schools. They want schools to start doing that. And we had a guest on the Big Hard Fact. He broke down the challenges that comes with attempting multilingual education in a country like Nigeria with hundreds of languages, most of which have no strong tradition of scholarship. So that idea was extremely difficult to pull off. He said, but it's not impossible to do. Now, the big question will remain, is the Nigerian government committed to doing this kind of thing, putting up this kind of feat? Because it would be an amazing feat. Yeah. What's photosynthesis in Urobo?
Well, rather than be interested in what photosynthesis is in Urobo, they should make it more practical. That's what as a science student, I thought that the biggest problem for science and technology in this country was that it wasn't practical. We didn't have all the stuff in
so
the
how
labs,
would you teach the practical version of science in Urobo?
Bring the props, bring the gizmos to the class and put it there and show them how it happens, rather than telling us theory. Okay. This is how it happens.
Okay, so how will I say put this gaseous fluid inside of this gaseous, do it.
I'm not going to do it.
You don't know how to speak Urobo, do you?
I speak Urobo, but I'm not speaking Urobo here. It's a kingdom language.
Well, that's it on the Big Three. I'm thinking about those Singaporean children, and I want to ask you, if in today's world, reading and writing is enough, are those the only basic skills that people should have today? What other types of illiteracy do you think, not illiteracy, what other types of literacy do you think should be taught at an early age? Let us know on Facebook at Nigeria Info FM. Twitter is also Nigeria Info FM. Coming up, a conversation with the guys from Raleigh Academy. They're always teaching you how you can be forex literate. That's a form of literacy. Literacy as far as dealing with forex is concerned. That conversation is coming up. And afterwards, let's look at security in the past 100 days in Lagos. I am Sandra Ezekwesili.
And I am Aghogho Oboh.
99.3 Nigeria Info.
Hello. Welcome to Raleigh Academy on radio.